Hey, this is Ken Finnan from Capital Advantage Tutoring, and it's my job to get you past this FINRA exam, Series 6, Series 7, SIE, all those things, the 63, 65, 66 to Series 24. I'm doing these videos to help those that can't really pay for a tutor or have to self-sponsor and pay for their own stuff, so I'm trying to give back a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about margin for a second. So margin is when you want to buy stock. Okay, so when you want to buy stock and you have to pay 20 grand for it, maybe you don't have that kind of money. So broker dealers under Regulation T allow you to leverage your money. So you can take 10 grand and buy $10,000 worth of stock, like a mortgage, right? So if you buy a $100,000 house, you're not paying 100 grand. You're going to pay like 20 and then borrow the rest, and you're going to pay it off. That's a mortgage. Same thing here. It's just 50%. So when you buy stock, you have to put down 50%. Makes sense? Okay, so let's go with a couple things. If you buy 20 grand, you put down 10, you borrow the rest. To borrow the 10, that's called your debit balance. So your market value is what the stock is worth. The debit balance is what you borrow. And the Reg T amount is what you have to deposit. Now that's the initial margin request, margin call, when you put the money down for the first time. Anytime after that, you don't have to put more money down unless you go below a certain number. And what they do is they say, look, if you buy 20,000 in stock and you put down 10, you're 50%. And you borrowed the 10. Remember, you always owe that the debit balance. That is always going to be paid back. So all the losses come out of your side. So if you buy $20,000 worth of stock, you deposit 10, you're borrowing 10. If the stock drops by 2 grand, it's not like a 1,000 each. You're losing the whole 10 grand. So your equity drops to 8,000. So what happens is, and so 8,000 out of 20 is whatever that is. It's probably like 40%. I don't know. I can't do math. Okay. But if your equity drops to below 25% of the market value, you will get a maintenance call and have to put money in. That's on the long side. If you're long stock and you're using margin, if your equity falls below 25%, then you get a maintenance call and you have to come up with some money. The other maintenance call is if your equity falls below 2 grand. So you can never have less than 2 grand and use margin, okay? So if you're using margin, you have to put down 2 grand. At least there has to be at least 2,000 of equity in the account. Doesn't have to be cash, it could be equity, okay? Now, if I buy 3,000 in stock, well, Reg T would be 1,500, like I just said, but the minimum is 2, so you have to put down 2 grand. The only time that you can put down less than 2 grand is if you buy less than 2 grand. So buying, not the shorting, buying. So if you buy $1,500 worth of stock, what's the most you could lose? 1,500. So you just have to put the 1,500 down. But once you buy more than 2 grand and you're going to start using margin, you have to put at least $2,000 down. That's just the deal. Okay. And those minimum maintenances are set by FINRA, not by Reg T, not by the Federal Reserve Board. So again, Reg T is that 50% rule set by the Federal Reserve Board. That's one of the tools of the Fed that they could change. They don't, but they could. Okay, so now on the short side, what happens is if you're going to sell stock short, say you're going to sell 50,000 in stock short, you're going to receive 50 grand because you sold stock. So there's 50 grand in your account. You have to put $25,000 of your own money on top of that. So really you're going to have 75 grand sitting in your account, 50 from selling the stock that wasn't yours, and 25 of your own money. So the credit balance is going to be what you initially sold it for, the proceeds, plus 50%. So you're going to sell $50,000 worth of stock, put 25 grand of your own money in there. That's your credit balance. So that's your credit balance, just so you understand what it is. That never changes. Just like the debit balance doesn't change unless you pay it down, credit balance doesn't change unless you put more money in or whatever. So credit balance is kind of set because it's always proceeds from the sale plus 50%, which is the Reg T requirement. Okay, let's do a little math. Let's have some fun. Okay, so we're going to go to this. Boom. We're sharing a screen. I love it. Okay, so now I have a little acronym. So I use Mr. DESB. It's our favorite. It's a little acronym. It's kind of funny. Mr. DESB. Okay, so Mr. DESB is our acronym. So I'm going to put here just so we have it. Okay, so I have, here is my market value. M stands for market value. I'm going to erase this in a second, but I want you to see this. M is for market value. R is for Regulation T, which is always going to be, what is that always going to be? That's always going to be 50%. And if I can do this right, 50% of the market value. And that changes as the market value goes up and down, that reg T will change. D is your debit balance. That's what you borrowed, okay? Easy stuff. E is your equity. Now, equity is always going to be market minus debit. Always going to be market minus debit. So equity is your ownership. So if you have a $100,000 house and you owe 10 grand on it, you have 90 grand in equity. But if you have a $100,000 house and you owe 80,000 on it, you only have 20 grand in equity. So it's always market value minus debit, which is what it's worth, minus what I owe. I like that. Okay. SMA is a special memorandum account. I am too lazy to write that out, so I'm not going to. SMA. It's usually what, if they say, what can you withdraw from the account? That's SMA. What can you withdraw from the account? Now, what this means is SMA, remember, what did they want you to have? They want you to have 50% of the market value in equity at all times. Okay, that's what they want. They want 50% of the equity in the market value. So if your equity is above 50%, they go, hey, you can borrow that. So SMA is the amount of equity you have that's above 50%. Now, there's a couple caveats to that, because what happens is once you create it, so if you buy stock and it goes up and your equity goes up and it's more than 50%, you can borrow that. If the stock then drops, you still have that equity. It's like a line of credit, okay? So that's where we are with that, is that the SMA is going to be like a line of credit so that you can borrow from that. Now, you remember, you're borrowing it from your equity. It's like a home equity loan. You're not actually walking away with the cash. You're borrowing it. So you're paying interest, and it's increasing your debit balance by doing that. But the point is, they're saying, hey, your equity's gone up. You're fine. You can borrow from it. We're all good with that. But again, you have to use the SMA to lose it. So once it goes up and you create SMA, if the stock goes back down, you can still borrow and use that money. The only, again, another caveat, because I like that word now, is that you cannot pull the money out if it's going to put you below minimum maintenance, the 25 or 30%. You cannot do that. And then the last one is buying power. It's how much stock you can buy with the SMA, okay? So buying power is going to be how much stock you can buy with SMA. So remember, if I have SMA of 5 grand, that's like having 5 grand in cash. How much stock can I buy with 5 grand in cash? I can buy 10,000. So, or like, think of the other way. If I want to buy 10,000 in stock, I have to put 5 grand down. So the other way around is if I have 5 grand in cash, I can buy 10,000 in stock. So buying power is always 2 times SMA. So let's go through the formulas here. Equity is going to be market minus debit. That's good. Then SMA is going to be equity above the 50%. So that's going to be equity minus the reg T, which always changes, okay? And then buying power is 2 times SMA. I like it. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so now let me get it here. I'll erase what I can without screwing anything up. Boom. So let's start with a number. Let's say I buy $50,000 worth of stock. What do we know? We know we have to deposit 25 grand. I can do that because I can't see anything because I am blind as a bat. Okay, 25 grand. Now, if I deposit 25 grand, that means I borrow 25. So my debit is 25,000. Easy stuff. Now, equity is always going to be market, is always going to be the market minus the debit. Okay, so debit balance is 25 grand. That's good. My market value is 50. My debit is 25. My equity is going to be 25,000. Boom. My market minus debit is equity. So it's what it's worth minus what I owe. So now, if I look at this, I go, well, my equity is 25. My rate T is 25, so I have no SMA. None. So that means I also have no buying power. But let's try. Of course, I can't get a heat price in that button. Okay, so let's try this now. What if I said, same scenario, we're going to build off this. What if the stock on its own rose to 60,000? Okay, if it rises to 60 grand, well, my debit balance doesn't change because that's what I borrowed, right? So that's going to stay the same, 25,000. Now my equity is going to be 60 minus 25 because it's worth 60. I owe 25. That's what I have to pay back. So 60 minus 25, that gives me an equity of 35,000. Now I have equity of 35 grand, but what do they want in the account? Always 50% of the market. So that's going to be 30,000. So let's see. So I have equity of 35. I have a rate T of 30. So I have an extra $5,000. That's awesome. So I have an SMA of $5,000, which means I can borrow that. I can buy stock. I can do anything I want with it. Take it out, go on vacation. Not that you can now because of COVID, but although in a couple of years, if you're still watching this, you'll remember COVID as a thing in the past. Now, so if I have an SMA of $5,000, I can buy 10,000 in stock. Easy stuff. I love it, love it, love it. Okay, so that's great. Now let's throw another twist on this. See if I can fit it in the screen. So now instead of this, so we got this. So remember, equity is market minus debit. SMA is equity minus the current Reg T, half the current market value. And buy and power is always 2 times that. And remember something, on the test, they have to give you market and they have to give you debit. They have to. They have to give you market and they have to give you debit. So let's say stock doesn't move, but let's say we sold 2K in stock, okay? In stock, sold 2,000 worth of stock. So what's gonna happen here? So let's see. So now our market value goes down to 58 because we sold 2,000 of it. And when you sell stock, doesn't cash come into your account? So then your debit balance is gonna go down to 23,000 because remember, you owe that money. So anytime you put cash in the account, it's going to reduce what you owe. I love it. Okay. So that's 23 grand. So now 58 minus 23. Oh, my equity doesn't change at all. It's still 35,000. And that kind of stinks. So it doesn't help me much, but let's see if it does. So now I want to find out how much I can borrow, how much I can withdraw from the account. So my Reg T is always going to be 50% of that. So 50% of 58,000 would be, well, why am I? Is that 29,000? 29? I'll say 29,000. Okay. 29. If I can type it right. 20. One of these days I'll get the right number. 29,000. So, wow. So look, my equity is, my Reg T went down. That's awesome. So equity is 35. Reg T is 29. So my SMA is 6,000. And then my buying power is now 12. So understand, if you sell stock, your equity doesn't change, but your SMA goes up by half the amount that you sold it for. You can do the math. Remember, they have to give you market. They have to give you debit. Let's try one more scenario before we head out of here. I'll be doing short margin next week. Okay, so now, let's say instead of that, let's just add 2K in cash. Not selling stock, just adding 2K in cash. I love it. Okay, so let's make sure my screen is out of the way. Okay, so now, I add $2,000 in cash. Well, that doesn't affect my market value because the market value is the value of all my stocks. I love it. So now my debit balance, again, I'm adding cash. Why would I want to pay interest when I don't have to? So my debit balance, I'm paying interest on. So every time I add money, I'm going to reduce it. So that's my new debit balance is now 21,000. Remember, when you add cash, the debit balance goes down, not up. So now what's my equity? 58 minus 21. That should be, and I always do a math. You always have to do blah, blah, blah. Pretend to use a calculator. That's going to be 37,000. Okay? I can type. Wow, that's horrible. 37,000. So that's my new equity. Now, hold on. Let's go here. That's my equity. That's great. I love it. That's my ownership. So if I were to sell out my account right now, I would pay back the 21 and walk away with 37 grand in cash. Reg T is always going to be half the market value, so that's going to be 29,000 still. And so my equity is 37. So how much can I borrow? I want to go on vacation. How much can I spend? Now remember, again, I told you SMA, if you're taking it out, you are borrowing it. So it increases your debit balance once you do it, which means you're paying more interest. So 29,000, 37 minus 29 should be, is that 8,000? 8. That's 8,000. So 8,000 is my SMA. That's how much money I can withdraw. Now, if I wanted to do that and buy more stock, I could buy 16,000 in stock. Wonderful. So that's long margin. That's kind of all the twists they can do. It's not going to be that hard. I'll do short next week. Couple of things to check on. If my example is this, if I remember, minimum maintenance is $2,000. Or 25%, whichever is higher. Okay, so if your 25% is below $2,000, you got to put in $2,000. If you buy 3,000 in stock, you have to put down $2,000. If you buy $80,000 in stock, you have to put down 40. Okay. Now, if it goes below, your equity goes below 25%, you have to put in money. But here's a question. So now, if they ask you what's your minimum maintenance, the answer would be a little bonus. Everyone who left is missing out on this. Okay, so a little bonus here is that if you were to say, what's the minimum maintenance, you would do 58,000 times 0.25. If I did 0.25, that would help. That would be 14,500. So in this scenario right here, with this scenario, with the 58,000, my minimum equity is 14,500. Now, there's a question they could ask, and you just got it does work. They may say, at what point when this market value drops, will you be at minimum maintenance? They're not asking you what minimum maintenance is. We know that's 14.5. But if they say, at what market value will this drop to where you will hit minimum maintenance? Because remember, as it goes up, your equity goes up and your percentage gets better. But as it goes down, it gets worse. So you just have to remember debit balance divided by 0.75. So you're going to take the debit balance of 21,000 divided by 0.75. That equals 28 grand. So if my market value drops all the way to 28,000, typing would be great, wouldn't it? I got to move this ugly ass face that you're seeing. So if my market value runs to 28,000, then I only have 7,000 in equity, right? Because 28 minus 21, and 7,000 is 25% of 28. So there you go. You're right at minimum maintenance. If it drops any more, they do a maintenance call. They ask you to drop some cash. Now, what can you use to pay off your maintenance? You cannot use SMA. Remember that. You cannot use SMA. You can use cash, or you can find fully paid stock and deposit double the amount. So in this case, I'm good. But say I owe $2,000 in minimum maintenance. Say it dropped enough. I could either write a check for $2,000. Remember, can't use SMA for it. Or I can put $4,000 in stock down, fully paid, double the amount. Because remember, the borrow value on stock is 50%. So if I put in 4, that works out to be $2,000 in equity, which puts me over the top. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Please like, follow, and share. And have a great weekend. I know it's probably watching it on Monday, but have a great weekend anyway. Love it. Talk to you later. And